How would you describe your style of coaching? Are you somebody who wants to fix all the problems you see quickly, or are you somebody who steps back and lets everybody get on with it, or something in between? In this episode of the Don't Tell Me, Show Me podcast, we're going to dig into coaching styles. We've heard a lot recently in our recent episodes from Coach Mike Ford about how he changed his style. We've got Alan Keane with us today alongside Mark Bennett, and we're going to dig into what is a coaching style and how can you compare coaching styles from different people. It's episode 21 of the Don't Tell Me, Show Me podcast. Right, guys, let's get into it. We're discussing coaching styles. You both had a brilliant interview with Mike Ford where he discussed and shared how he changed his style over the years. Alan, I know you took a copious amount of notes on that. So what jumped out at you regarding Mike's coaching style, and then how does that connect and reflect against your own style?
Well, before we get into that level, Simon, the thing that jumped out to me first from our really rich conversation with Mike was the journey he went on, and his style going from one particular style of coaching delivery to another, and then the reasons behind that. That was the thing that jumped out first and foremost. And, he articulated it very well around being open-minded to support from an outsider, number one, on his coach journey. Like that's a whole topic in itself. How do you get to a space or a place where you feel comfortable enough to let a so-called outsider in to your coaching world, your coaching environment, observe and have discussions with you about your delivery and its impact and evidence of impact? Very, very tricky places to go for any coach. And that's the first thing that should be acknowledged. So I found Mike very refreshing because he talked about that journey, talked about the challenges of that journey, and then he articulated really well what the journey entailed in terms of the style from what it was to what it became.
And what did you make of that transition from telling to asking to testing as he adjusted his coaching style? I mean, it's a brilliant story about the game versus Ireland, etc. And for people listening to this, please go back and listen to that episode. But also, you don't have to get something out of our discussion here, because we're talking about styles. We're talking about that bandwidth or a spectrum from telling people what to do at one end to just allowing them to do whatever they wanted at the other end. Like, I personally struggle to decide where I should be on that continuum and when I should move.
I do too, and I'll get into my journey a little bit later on this call potentially. But with Mike, he was very clear on that call about the value of engaging the players in their own learning, players becoming the drivers of decision making in action, not conversation at halftime, not only a conversation at halftime, not only a conversation with subs or in stoppages of training, but actually them driving the decisions independently in action when they're under pressure, competition, and then players supporting players to drive the decision making. He was very good at sharing the value of that. Now, that sounds great as a theory and as a concept, but actually how do you go about coaching that and bring it to life is one thing. And then even harder, how do you make a shift from telling them that's what you're used to, because that was how you were coached potentially, and that's how coaching was perceived as value and so on, and all these different other influences. How do you go from that, doing that from 10 to 15 to 20 years, to then taking on a different way of coaching where you actually kind of have to step back and you have to scan more and you have to snipe and you have to see things that you never saw before because you're looking for different things. You're not just looking at outcomes, you're looking at processes. And then you have to educate and help the players with these processes. That's a really difficult shift, difficult change. But Mike summed it up really well, if I can remember, and I'll use my own words. I'm not quoting Mike verbatim here, but he said, he left a feeling with me that he saw value in, I guess, evoking the players' motivation and wisdom in order to achieve outcomes. And the coaching methods he used allowed him to do that. And Mark will probably speak on that a little bit as we go, because we've got Mark with us, who was that stranger, that outsider coming in Not taking over, but asking loads of questions and looking for evidence. Mark was the person that Mike spoke so well about in terms of him making that transition.
I think this is the point when people say about coaching styles. Remember, you may change, or you may just add to what you already have to give you more options. An example would be, if your only options I'm going to keep telling and reminding, then that's my go-to, whether doing well or not. I haven't really got another option. But now when we get to, okay, now I'm tell, and we know the common one is, well, now I'm going to start asking, which was what, the journey Mike went on. But you go, well, now we're stood around asking a lot of questions, but I'm still not seeing the change. I think you mentioned on Simon on the last episode near the end is, you give me the right answers now, but I'm still not seeing it. So we're building practitioners, not theorists, although you need an understanding. So then it's, well, how do I build the spectrum even more now? What else do I need to put in there? And that's when we start looking at, well, let's get evidence first. Let's film yourself coaching. Let's look at it. Even things like, Alan, I know you've done it years ago, is let's time how long we're playing in opposition, how long in sessions we're stood around listening to coach, how often you're stopped as players without the coach having timeouts, how long are them? When we have an interaction with players on their own, I'm listening, or coaches, now let me scan for, has there been an actual change? We've said something, have they applied it into the practice? And was that in opposed, unopposed? So now we're getting data to go, well, hang on, are my interactions, whatever I'm choosing, effective, one in that session? But then, as we talked about in the previous episode, and Mike did so well, is the covert recall. In the next session, we're going to go on attack. I'm scanning for defense. Is that stuff we showed we could do when it was fresh, short-term recall still there? Now I'm getting data. So now I start saying, well, actually, is my coaching effective or not? When it's not, then we can start investigating. Okay, so what's missing? And that's when we start to spot, well, this is my go-to. This is when I'm under pressure. This is what I do. And so, okay, is there something else you can do? And then we start adding to that bandwidth, adding to that spectrum of coaching. So it's not always, I used to be this, now I'm this. You're a great example, Alan. And I'd ask you to reflect on this for the listeners, is you were a coach that predominantly were in tell and instruction, high preparation, high planning, great knowledge. But you still have that. But now, one, you're in a better mindfulness of judgment of deciding, is this the right approach now for me? But now you've got more options where you go, actually, I could also choose to do this now, which you may have had in theory before, but as a practitioner, you weren't skilled in doing it or confident to choose that. Do you want to share that, Alan, as just from your experience, where you were and where you are?
Yeah, absolutely. And I call it a sliding scale, Mark. Like I move along a sliding scale depending on what I feel is needed in that moment. And sometimes, I can be in a space where, like in a timeout of a game, European Championship, we're playing, big game, could be quarterfinal. And in one of those timeouts, you might hear me ask two questions. That's the timeout. We're done. Everyone has a shared understanding based on the answers that came back. What more do I need to say? Right, off and go, follow through with the plan. Other times in a timeout, I'll be completely directive because I feel in that moment, right, pressure's high. They're not fully sure. There might be a bit of disconnect here with the task cohesion. Bang, I'm straight in there, I'm telling, and I'm sending them out. But I'm checking before they go out. Are we all on the same page? It could be a 10-second kind of review. So I call it a sliding scale. Now, I go back to a podcast you were on years ago. You described me as a fiery Irishman. I still, 5 years later, I'm not sure how to take it. Is that a compliment? Is that an insult? I've asked a bunch of Irish friends and they don't know how to take it either, but I'll take it as a compliment. You're right. I was very directive. And in some cases, Mark, being truthfully honest, that spilled over into demonstrative. And it was always with good intention. And I think there's harm associated with it, aligning yourself to one style. I think there's harm associated with aligning yourself to a particular style that's around being directive, around telling. If that's all you do, then the harm associated with that is you're limiting the ability of players to become self-sufficient and make decisions under pressure, maybe when you're not there, maybe when you're there, but your voice doesn't mean anything because the action's moving so fast. To the other end of that spectrum, slide all the way over to the other side, and it's I step back. and I don't get involved. I don't tell because I feel they're ready. If you stay too much in that space, players will drown at some point because they'll come up against opposition and they'll have experiences they've never experienced before, and it's all new. And it's now you're dealing with players who are lacking confidence, doubt, nothing worse. The only thing worse than that's injury. So, you've got to be pressing the right button. And I think this is a definition of a master coach. And I'm not there. I will constantly be working towards this. And I think all coaches do. You just work toward it at a different level. I think the master coach presses the right button or sits on the right part of that sliding scale at the right time based on what the players need. And that goes back to Simon. You have often heard you talk, and I've said it myself. Like, has a coach got 1 year experience repeated 20 times? Because that's 20 years of same coach repeating the same thing every year. Or do you step back and you go, right, who am I as a coach? What's my strengths? What's my areas of growth based on what my team needs? And am I working on those phases? So, Mark, I'm very familiar with your sliding scale and your transfer of ownership from coach to player around tell, ask, discuss, challenge, and allow. So if you took those 5 areas, you go, right, based on this context, where should I be in with one of those 5 areas for what would help the players be successful? Difficult to do. First step is what we're doing here, is sharing awareness.
Yes. Can I add, Alan, the one thing I noticed with you and Mike and the coaches I've worked with that are real growth mindset that work through. And Simon, you've worked recently, continually with Alan. It would be interesting your insight. But I'll tell you what you used to do before, and I think there'll be so many listeners that will connect with this. When I started to work with you, it was quite clear you were thinking before you acted. However, I felt you were thinking about, I'm not seeing what I think you can do. And the intention was really positive, but then there was frustration there. And they go, right, now, why aren't you doing it? Okay, let's go through this again. And that's where predominantly it was in that tell process of clarity. So there was a thoughtfulness, but I think now you are now thinking, but the question you're asking yourself, one is more in a mindful state, but also you're asking yourself, okay, what is needed now? What am I seeing? Where is the barrier? Where is the source? Okay, now I'm thinking that what is my intervention, and then you act on that process. Now, I'm not saying you do that all the time, but I've noticed where Mike's big game change was that as well, where he stepped back and goes, okay, what am I seeing? Okay, so where's the source? Okay, what are my choices now? Right, I'm choosing to go for this one. Then they go for it. So there was that data capture, and if you think about it, that's what we want athletes to do. It's the same thing in that moment, right? What am I seeing? What's happening? Okay, where's the source? So what's the solution? Is that a me? Is that a we? If it's a we, I need a share, and then we commit to it. And it's the speed in which we can do that, relevant the environment and the pressures to allow us to make an informed choice that we believe is the one needed at the moment. I think that's been a huge improvement in your area.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll lean into that, Mark. Simon, I'm going to lean into what Mark's just said, and maybe go take it to the next chapter around what you've just said. I've definitely leaned into it. It hasn't been easy. I've needed a lot of support, and you two have been awesome at helping me to get there. I feel really confident and comfortable about where I am now, to the point where when I don't get it right, I'm absolutely fine with it because I'm completely aware as to what the source of me not getting it right was. And now I just follow back up with a plan to make sure I'm better prepared next time. So I'm very comfortable that I regress at times, Mark, because it's part of being human. I'm okay with it. If I regress too often, it's where I'll pump the brakes and I might reach out to somebody and say, I'm struggling with my coaching now. Can you just come and support me for a couple of weeks and just basically recalibrate me? I would do it with one of you two if I felt I was going there. And that may come, by the way. That's the reality. It may come. I hope it comes because it means that, I'm progressing in different ways. So what worked for me, Mark, allowing myself space, because you're right, I would boil over and be very reactive. And then I would beat myself up on the drive home from practice or from game. What I've learned to do is allow myself space to have the freedom and power to reconnect to what I value as good coaching. So things would happen in a practice, in a game, and I go back to my days in Reading. I would take that hour and a half drive home, and that freaking hour and a half drive felt like 5 hours because I'd be so frustrated not with the players, but with myself for going to a place with my style of coaching that I didn't want to. And I had to figure out a way to find, I had to find a way to go, right, I can't keep doing this. I'm aware of what good coaching is. I'm aware of my effectiveness as a coach when I'm in that space. When I'm coaching at my best, I'm very aware of what that looks like, sounds like, feels like for me and for others. And I learned that if I can create a space between what's just happened and how I respond, I can reconnect to those values that players first in terms of making decisions, having be going first in that process will benefit us in the long term, as opposed to me shouting and being quite demonstrative at time because they didn't do it the right way, or I'm telling them what to do before ahead of time, hoping they don't do the wrong thing. I'm trying to avoid failure. And the irony of it is I'm not moving towards success for me and the players in those moments. So creating a space between how I reacted and how I responded became a key go-to for me in these moments as I made that transition, because it was difficult, Mark. It is difficult, and I think I've tried to encourage and influence other coaches to go on that journey a little bit, and a lot have quit because it is tough to stay on that, and that's where the support comes in. I don't think I don't know if I would have made that shift, Mark, without support. Without without a Kiwi guy who I never met before sending me 38 questions that really provoked thoughts I never had before about from where I was standing on the sideline during a game to what's the opportunity cost with full court pressuring for 40 minutes to you, Mark, putting a GoPro on my chest and just probing me with questions but never giving me answers, but I'm finding good answers based on the questions. So I without the support, I don't think I don't think I would have been able to make the shift.
I think that's
and ultimately, guys, Mark, I'll just finish this one. Ultimately, I don't know if I would have got to a place where I can sit in a space, regardless of what's going on in my coaching domain. I can sit in that space with comfort, and I don't feel like I'm lacking confidence, self-efficacy, doubt. I may have moments where I'm, I could have done that better, or this is tough, this is challenging, but I don't ever feel like exiting. I'm not in the dip as the change curve goes. I don't ever feel like exiting the process. I only ever feel like, right, there's a solution to this problem, and if I can't find it, I'm going to find somebody else that can help me find that.
I think it's a tough ask to ask any coach, manager, parent to change, even when they feel they need to change towards who they want to become to impact kids, adults, whoever it is to do that on their own without support. And what's quite interesting is all three of us on here started from a place of practitioner or having a passion for something, but it's evolved into recognition of I need to provide support for others, not over a week, 2 weeks, over many, many months to allow them to be successful. And we understand how difficult that is. But I think all of us, you shared a video a few months ago where it was just, Simon, you checking in with Alan. It was a check and challenge, but it was done with care. And I think finding support that is check and challenge and celebration is often where the missing link is. What you don't want is a support of someone saying, yeah, Alan, don't worry about it. You're doing great. And you're thinking, that's not what I need right now. I need someone to check me and give me guidance. But when I'm down, I need someone to go, hang on a minute, Alan, remind me what you said success was. Okay, review against that, not the result. So based on, I'm killing myself for nothing. That was actually pretty good, wasn't it? Yes, it was. So that's that again. We're talking about mentoring now, using the same spectrum of actually what's appropriate now to impact that coach. The same way as we're asking for a coach is, what's impactful now to impact the team or the individual player, to allow them to build ownership, to have an impact. So when I'm not with them, I've had a positive impact.
I think that you're 100% right, Mark. And that's easy for a coach to go on that journey if their intention with coaching is pure. And I'm not going to take this down a rabbit hole here, but I think this is critically important. I think it's a really strong layer on top of what we're talking about here. If your intention as a coach is to be your best, not the best, I think going on this journey is easier. But what's your driver to be a coach? If it's status driven, and I'm saying it because it exists, and coaches don't like these type of conversations because they're uncomfortable because you have to look in the mirror and be honest with yourself. if you're doing this, if you're in this domain, you're in this profession, to be the best version of yourself, whatever that can be, and then accept that journey and accept where you're at, then you can make this change. I also hold the feeling and I hold the thought around the coaches who don't commit to this developing styles. You've got to step back and go, well, what's actually driving me to say I want to be that type of a coach, or is it I want to be perceived as that type of coach? Because when you're coaching to be the best version of yourself, you're going to be more open to putting more tools into your toolbox, as you said. Because if I believe in more of a way I used to coach, that's the best way to go, then I'm going to alienate every other style because that's perceived the right way. But then why am I perceiving it the right way? And what's preventing me from widening my lens to looking at other ways to do this, and not just leave that behind and go over here, adding tools to the toolbox. So are you coaching to be the best, or are you coaching to be your best? Good questions to reflect on.
I think another layer of that, Alan, is if someone said, well, I've had success coaching this way, but they're not understanding the reason you had success. If it's results success driven, and that type of coach is generally outcome result driven of what success is did you have a high capability team? Were you competing against lower capability teams? Were the people that you had luckily connected with that singular style of coaching? And actually, if you had a new group in, all of a sudden you're not getting the same success, even similar capability, because you don't know how to adjust how you're communicating to impact those individuals. Or all of a sudden now, these aren't as good a players as you had 2 seasons ago. You're not getting results. So now what do? Is it that only then when you look for help? Or is it now I'm blaming the athletes, not looking at self, which I think, Sal, and you talked about so well on the previous episode of, if something's not happening with how Impact coaches, let's look at self first. Let's not look at others. So I think that's another important element, Alan, is what's the reason why I'm reaching out for help in the first place? And then this is not a quick fix. This is, if I really want to enhance me, there's going to be some struggle. There's going to be some regression in my output, in my confidence, in how I interact, how smooth it's going to be. But that's fine, because that's exactly what we're asking athletes to do every single day when we're asking them to enhance or change something they're already doing. We tell them it's going to be, we should be telling them it's going to be tough. It's going to be uncomfortable. It may not be as easy, or you may not get the same outcome straight away, but we go through walking through the mud to get out the other side before it starts. But we've got to go for it. It's part of growth, and then embracing that back to where the support comes in.
I think another very important element, and I have to interject here, Simon, I feel like me and Mark are playing tennis here, and you're just like either a judge or a spectator in the stands. I'm so sorry. And I will stop after this one. I think another really important element, guys, is if I'm putting myself, when I listen to both of you, I try often to get into the seat of the listener on a podcast. And I find myself sometimes going, right, that's a lot to take on. I need to rewind that back and I need to digest it. But that's good. And I think one more important element I'd add on to what you just said there, Mark, is we're talking about styles of coaching. Most coaches won't know what their style is. Sorry, let me not do a disservice to the coaching domain. I believe there's many coaches out there that may not be able to articulate or tell the story to another person about their style of coaching. And that begs the question, well, how do you navigate that? Or how do you go on that journey? And I'd like just to offer the listeners something very simple. Stop performance reviewing the players for a period of time. Stop recording the games and statting the games. Put the camera on yourself as a coach and treat yourself as the performer. And start there as a baseline analysis. Just a baseline, how you coach, how you're communicating, how you're coming across, what's good, what are you doing, what could you do better? Just basic questions. What am I actually doing? Is it of value? What is that value? And 3, what could I do differently to add more value? And adding value is to the players if you're coaching through a place of care, which we spoke about previously. that your motivation is displaced to meet the needs of the players, not to serve your needs because you like the tactics and so on. So I think that's a start and that's a baseline. And that was new for me on my journey. Going back to, you guys asked me to speak on that a little bit. Mark, the day you put a GoPro camera on my chest was the most uncomfortable moment of my coaching career to that point in time. And now it's like something I just couldn't go without. If I know I want to improve one aspect of my coaching, like the camera's going on me. So hence, I think this might be 12 years, 13 years that I'm recording every time out for the national team. I've 13 European Championship years of recorded changing room talks and timeouts. And again, like going back, you can see me moving along a sliding scale in those timeouts. And I'd be happy to share if we ever wanted to do it on one of these podcasts and throw a timeout up there and actually just identify where on that sliding scale we are. So I think that's important for a coach. How do you baseline your style first and foremost before you start changing your style? In fact,
sorry, Simon, just adding an S to that, Alan. So would it be easy for people to understand as opposed to coaching styles? Say, what are your coaching styles? Styles. Is it an easy way to go? Oh, so I have many. Yeah, you have many for the situation.
Yeah.
Sorry, Simon.
No, that's okay. I'm reminded of, I think it's the Brene Brown expression. I'm not here to be right. I'm here to get it right. And that shift is really quite profound. And you mentioned earlier, Mark, whether you're in coaching or leadership or parenting, I think that approach has a lot of value in it because you see some coaches just wanting to be right. So, for example, the current right is ecological dynamics or a constraints-led approach, whatever. And I'm not in any way making a comment here of whether the value of those approaches. Previously, it was something else, or there was long-term athlete development. There's a concept going around. It seems like at all times, and a coach who's trying to be right, I see sometimes maybe trying to adopt these approaches because it's the right way to coach, as opposed to I'm here to get it right, and ecological dynamics or applying constraints or small-sided games or whatever you want to use, those are tools in my toolbox. Those are different styles, perhaps, and I'm going to use a style that meets the needs of the people I coach.
And I think what's important you're saying there, Simon, just to add some texture, is understanding I've got a baseline myself, and Alan, use that video example, watch it back, but then get someone else to watch it as well and have a discussion with the notes of, am I seeing the same as you? Am I hearing the same as you? But once you identify, there's a gap here, I struggle in this situation. Then you go, okay, let me explore what is out there that I could add that would help me be more impactful in that situation. So if ecological dynamics, as an example, is something, oh, well, let me investigate that. Don't be fearful of going, let me check everything out of my, there's no such thing as a toolbox, it's this way. Don't get caught up in that, because if someone's telling you that, then walk away, in my opinion. But if someone's going, okay, well, let me understand where you are now. Why are you asking about this? So let me share and understand how you could integrate this. Now, it may be you're all over it, go, I don't need to do this anymore because this covers that. But at least you're doing it in an open investigation kind of way to see the value of, okay, now I can see how this fits. Okay, how could I integrate it? Not how do I throw this away and change it for this? And I think going back to your point of fashion, one of my pet hates, I have a few, as you know, is things like psychological safety. All of a sudden, it's become the words to say over the last few years. But was it there? Well, you'd like to think it was always there, but are we now going to the point, well, I'm a bit scared of it, so I'll just say this, but I don't really understand how that looks to me and what that should be. It's just a word that is kind of like danger, danger, danger. It's got to be psychological safety, but I don't really understand it. What am I doing well? Where do I need to change? So I think that's important for anything. When you're looking at yourself, what's working, what's not, get someone externally out. Sometimes a different sport is great to look at and go, yeah, I agree. Have you thought about this? Or give me this situation. You shared a great coaching session there. Record one that's not very good, that didn't go well. Let's review that one. Okay, how are we doing now? And then you have the discussion to explore something that you can integrate, not I'm a bit fearful of these words or what I should do now, so therefore I will try and become that, which is not how you advance your coaching.
Right, guys,
So
we've got 4 or 5 minutes left here, so I'm gonna give you a constraint. I'm adapting my podcast hosting style here and giving you a constraint. Give me like a couple of takeaways, let's say 2 takeaways that you think coaches could learn from or could take away and apply to their coaching and their coaching styles from today onwards.
I'll go first, Mark, because I know you're going to add huge value, and I steal from you every time you talk anyway. So I want you to go last.
You don't have to sell it, Alan. You don't have to sell it. You just go.
I'll go. So my offer, Simon, would be to explain my own journey real quick, succinctly, term it, actually label it, and then talk about the final label. So I've gone from a coach-centered approach to my coaching to an athlete-centered approach to the point where I did a master's and master's degree in that, to a need-centered approach, which I've done a PhD in. So I've gone on a forensic journey with these styles of coaching, and I've landed on the need-centered approach right now. Let's not unbox what that is, but into too much detail. But in summary, it aligns quite well to what Stephen Rolnick helped us understand years ago around fix, follow, guide. And all 3 are appropriate and needed within your coaching. So fixing is about taking control, pretty much telling the athlete what to do because that's perceived what they need. Follow simply means that you allow, and they're guiding. You're scanning for, are they on track? And then guide is a combination of both, based on kind of, okay, well, I might do both in the same interaction with that player. I may fix and follow in a conversation. And I think that's a really nice framework, as well as Mark's one, which we talked about, shifting the ownership scale from tell to allow, and all those other 3 aspects that are in between. So I would offer the coaches that, baseline your styles, and then start to learn about other styles that exist that are out there. And it may not come from sports. Stephen Rolnick introduced this to us, not sport related. It was a way of communicating effectively with people to help them go on a journey of being self-sufficient and making better choices.
Thanks, Alan. All right, Mark.
I'll go the don't do followed by a do. So don't do. Don't watch YouTubes of elite level coaches on their documentaries of what they do in the change room, what you see them coaching. It's edited. It's not real. It's not the reality of what you see, warts and all. They tend to not do that. The motivational speaks are only before they win a game at halftime, not when they lose. They still lose. So don't get caught up in that, because you're only seeing the bits they want you to see, and that they're not the players you're working with. What to do, I would say, understand what your lighthouse is. What is success for you? Who are you working with? Is it engagement, enjoyment, keeping them in the game and grow them? Is it high pressure and performance? And then understand, film yourself, but then look at it, good and bad days. Where am I effective? Where am I not? And that may be with certain players, certain situations. Once you identify where am I great, keep hold of that, understand what it is and why you're doing it. Where you're not, then start seeking out support and explore ways that could enhance in those areas. And that's when you can seek out for help. I'd like to think this podcast is one of those areas where you can. And here's a link. If you identify that, put a question to us, and that could be a podcast.
Right. Well, thanks, guys. Reminder to our listeners and viewers, please like and subscribe. You can get us in all your podcast feeds now, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever you listen to. If you subscribe, you go into the magic logarithm thingamajiggery, and we go further up the scale, and then other coaches can find this information as well. So please like, subscribe, and as Mark said, comment, or if you're in touch with us, get us on LinkedIn or Twitter and drop us a DM, and we'd be more than happy to feature your questions in a subsequent episode. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.